the word AI is overused. I think over time, much like we don't say cloud software anymore, we just say software because all software is cloud. Eventually, AI is going to not be the term that dominates everything because it is not a product, right? It is a technology like the internet, like electricity that permeates many other products. Jay, I love the recaps that you do.
Yeah.
But I don't think you were doing them when Camden started talking about this.
No.
They attributed $4 million in annualized savings to their centralization and AI efforts. And it wasn't one or the other, it was both. AI is we're going to go workflow by workflow and identify, does a human need to be involved there? And where we end up with the better consumer experiences, you will still need humans. We strongly believe at Funnel, you'll need them. But instead of doing the busy work to create the pen addendum, why not have them walk over a doggy gift basket to the unit, right? And say, hey, congrats on Fido. And that's going to be the point of differentiation is if everyone's using AI and everything goes agentic, the differentiation will still be the humans.
Welcome back to Multifamily Unpacked. Today's episode is a special rebroadcast from The Rent Roll, featuring two of the sharpest minds in rental housing today. First up is your host, Jay Parsons, economist, advisor, and creator of The Rent Roll, a top 100 podcast that cuts through the noise to unpack market trends, operator realities, and the stories shaping real estate. He's joined by Funnel CEO Tyler Christensen, who's at the center of the industry's shift toward AI-powered and centralized operations. Tyler works with the largest owners and managers in the space to translate what this transformation really means for teams, workflows, and the future of property operations. Jay and Tyler dive into where the industry is headed next and how leaders should be getting ready. Let's get into it.
Welcome. It's episode number 61 of The Rent Roll, your podcast on all things rental housing. I'm your host, Jay Parsons, and as always, talking about multifamily, SFR, and BTR. Thank you for making us part of your day. All right, so today's episode, a lot of fuss around AI these days. It's being blamed for the job growth slowdown, and at the same time, it's supposed to be the future of apartment leasing and management. Every prop tech company out there is talking about AI right now. And so every owner and manager has to have at least some baseline understanding of these things as well. And of course, we just had NMHC OpTech conference last week, a big prop tech conference for the multifamily industry out in Vegas. And so I felt like now is a good time to talk AI. Now, I am not a technologist whatsoever. And to be honest, I hope not the only one, but sometimes I feel a little burned out on this topic sometimes, just because it feels like there's so much noise around AI and technology. And I don't want to contribute to the noise. But at the same time, I don't want to just ignore it. I think that'd be foolish, of course, since it's becoming more real every day and it's only going to accelerate. And so we'll try to make it real here. We'll talk about where AI is today in the rental housing space, where it's going, and also a little bit of what impact that could have on the economy and therefore on rental housing demand as well. And our guest today is somebody who knows this space very, very well. Tyler Christensen, the CEO of Funnel, the AI and CRM software used heavily in the apartment business. Tyler is a second generation multifamily guy. And so he knows the industry, not just as a tech guy, but he understands the other side of things as well. And so we're going to have a fun conversation today. I've known Tyler a long time. He's a good guy. One more quick plug. I've been doing more on the newsletter side. So if you like getting stuff in your inbox, if you don't, I perfectly get it. But if you do like it, putting out anywhere from 1 to 3 newsletters a month. And you can get that at jparsons.com/newsletter. Okay, so as always, kick it off with, here's a chart. And today we don't have a chart, we got a quote. And so usually I'll spend a good bit of time on this section. Today we're going to keep it fairly brief, but I want to talk a little bit about AI to set up our conversation later with Tyler. And again, there's a lot of noise in the space, and I'm not an AI expert. I'm not going to pretend like I am. But, it's kind of annoyed me a little bit, and annoyed is probably a strong word, but I have a healthy degree of skepticism when people talk about fellow non-experts like me, talk about AI. Because I feel like everybody wants to assign it way too much credit and blame without really knowing what they're talking about, having a full grasp on it. And I don't want to contribute to the noise, but I mean, just think about this. How many headlines have you seen of late that blame AI for taking away all the jobs for Gen Zers coming out of college, for instance? And I see that and I think, I just don't think that passes the sniff test, okay? And so I read this in the last rounds of earnings calls. Angela Kleeman, the CEO of Essex, she was asked about the impact of AI, and I thought her answer was really good. And I want to read. I think I've alluded to this previously. I want to speak to this a little more depth because I think it's really interesting, and it speaks not only to how it's impacting rental housing, both from the operations and demand side, but also I think a lot of employers in all other kinds of industries could probably say the same thing. Okay, so let me read this. She said, in an environment where the macro environment is soft, businesses are and they should be focused on efficiency. And so I don't think from what we're seeing that they are AI-driven job losses. Okay, so right there. So what she's saying is that everyone's nervous, they're pulling back a little bit, and they're not hiring as much, they're trying to be more efficient, but they're not necessarily AI-driven. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the quote. She says, but in terms of what we think is going to happen with the conversation about AI displacing jobs and becoming or is viewed to be a disruptor, we do think it's going to happen at some point. AI capabilities is rapidly growing, and we're seeing research suggesting that most companies are experimenting with AI. So that experimentation level is very high, but the adoption, the level is low because the return on investment is still unclear. That's a very important point there she's making. All right, so back to the quote. So this is, again, she's talking about how Essex is using it. And I think you can make this case for not every industry, but a lot of other industries across the economy. So here she goes. She says, so for example, Essex, where we see AI benefiting data analytics and certain repetitive tasks, but it is still in the early developmental stages. And we need additional technology to interface with the AI applications for utilization. Essex has not had significant workforce reduction using AI. And so what we do expect is that the pace of disruption or job displacement will become more gradual. And because on the flip side, what we're seeing is, as I mentioned earlier, an unprecedented number of startups, small companies that because of AI can form businesses. And by the way, what a great point, right? So to have all this AI, we have to have more jobs. That creates more businesses to support all these things, not just AI technologists themselves, but the cottage industry that supports that too. And then go back to a quote. And that's not being picked up by the BLS, meaning the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but certainly it's being picked up by the demand that we are seeing in Northern California. All right. So great comments from Angela there. I thought that was really interesting. So again, I think just go back to the comment I made earlier. We all see these headlines. AI is taking away the jobs, right? But again, to me, and I think Angela's point backs this up, is that just at this point in the game, it doesn't make sense. I think we're all trying to explain the softer job numbers. And so in that rush to try to explain it, we're in this at the same time we're seeing this, we're also, everyone's asking ChatGPT to rewrite some emails and to create some dad jokes, right? So because AI is increasingly in front of us, I think we're probably too quick to assign it the blame for these softer job numbers. But I like what Angela says here, which is I think a balanced view, and I think she's right. Yes, everyone is probably experimenting with AI to some degree, whether you're an apartment or SFR operator or some other type of industry. But how many of us are truly seeing in our companies AI fully taking away a meaningful number of jobs that existed just 6 to 12 months ago? And probably not very many, if we're being honest. So of course, that could change in the future, like Angela said. And I thought obviously wouldn't be a surprise to see AI take away over time certain types of jobs. But is it really happening at scale today? I don't think so. Even Amazon, people point to Amazon. Obviously, they're one of the leaders in AI, and they've just announced a recent round of downsizing. But what they've said is that it's not really AI driven. It's just more efficiency driven. And we've been seeing that pattern across a lot of tech companies these last few years, is after the years of just building and hiring and offering all kinds of crazy employee benefits to be on campus, they pull back a little bit. And that's kind of what Amazon has said as well. It's more the itch for efficiency and eliminating redundancies. But in a lot of cases, those tech jobs are just getting shuffled around. But it's not like we've seen some big spike in unemployment, and particularly for tech. So again, I do think we'll see AI cause more disruption in the years to come. I don't think it takes you don't have to have a crystal ball to know that. And I know that reality worries a lot of people, and some for good reason in some cases. But think of it this way, if this is somewhat encouraging, which is AI is not the first major disruption we've seen here in the US. We had that little thing called the Industrial Revolution a century plus ago That took away a lot of jobs, to say the least. But it took away some jobs. It created a bunch of other jobs, and we adjusted. Many decades later, we had the offshoring spree, first for manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution now has an effect just everywhere else. And then also later for back office business jobs and back office tech jobs, white collar jobs. And you know what happened? We adjusted. We had the computer era, which that too was a big disruption, greatly reducing the number of, for instance, admin jobs who were, routing phone calls and typing up memos on typewriters, or data entry workers, et cetera. And you know what happened? We adjusted. So we've gradually become more and more of a services-based economy through these disruptions. And again, I'm no expert in AI, but it just seems like AI is going to further accelerate us in that direction. It disrupts, and then we adjust. But I believe we're a resilient bunch. We'll adjust to this as well, and we probably won't look back. And so again, short term, I'm skeptical that it's eliminating a lot of jobs. Longer term, it could disrupt a lot more jobs, but I think we'll adjust as always. So what does that mean for apartment demand and leasing, SFR demand and leasing? Probably not a ton. There's going to be pockets where it does. Obviously, if you have pockets like in Silicon Valley or the Silicon Slopes, and there are other pockets in tech places like in eventually Seattle, which doesn't have a lot of AI now, but that's going to come, and places like Austin, et cetera. There's going to be jobs created that help support AI. And that could be a pockets opportunity and see better demand there. Something Angela mentioned happening in the Bay Area. And then, on the flip side of this, you may have certain pockets of the country where there's a concentration of job types that are more easily replaceable by AI. And so I think that takes a little bit of foresight to kind of see, okay, before we're acquiring a site or acquiring for development or acquiring existing property, are they overly dependent on a certain employer or certain job category that is at risk for displacement through automation and AI? And if so, that probably should factor into the calculus. All right, so again, more on AI and specifically what it's doing and where it's going in the rental housing space in our conversation today with Tyler. But next, in the news. All right, so we got a few headlines. This comes from NightVest, which is a multifamily owner and operator with heavy presence in the Sun Belt. They just did, and of course, we had their CEO on this podcast a number of months ago. It was a good conversation, actually almost a year ago now. It's probably early this year. And so they just released their 2025-2026 multifamily renter sentiment report. So it's based on a survey of apartment renters. And there's some really interesting stats to share from this. 3 quick things I want to share with you. Number one, and this one's an encouraging one, 95% of renters expect their financial situation in 2026 to be better or the same as 2025. So we always hear the bad news, but that's a great stat. 95% said better or the same. Second thing, 47% said they plan to rent for at least the next 5 years. 47%, so almost half, plan to rent for at least 5 more years. And that is up from 42% who said the same last year. And then the third thing, and this is an interesting one too, it said, if mortgage rates dropped, are you more likely to buy a home? 53% of renters said yes, but that was down from 70% just 2 years ago. I'm not sure how much of that drop off is maybe due to the challenges of getting a down payment or just the preferential shifts favoring renting, or if it's just survey nuances here of differences in composition or whatever, but that's definitely an interesting stat. All right, let's go to our next headline. This one is going to come from Bloomberg. Speaking of rising costs, by the way, headline here is soaring insurance costs hit owners of New York City rent-stabilized units. Landlords are cutting spending on other expenses to cover higher operating costs, NYU report says. All right. Now, first of all, just a quick thought here. I think what's interesting is talk to people across the country. Insurance costs, I'm not an insurance expert, okay? But it's been interesting to me that back, a few years ago when insurance costs started spiking in the Sun Belt, I was like, oh, well, it's the storms down there. It's causing everything to go up more there than everywhere else in the country. And then they started to really come down. In fact, a lot of the groups that are in the Sun Belt and the coastal markets, they said now their insurance costs are down in some cases by double digits. Now they're not back to where they were previously, but their insurance bills are coming down. But it seems like in other parts of the country, those costs spiked later and have not quite dropped off as much. And maybe that's one of the cases here. So again, just different timing, different places, I suppose, and maybe other factors there. If somebody knows why that is, send me a note. But anyway, let's get back to this article. It says skyrocketing insurance costs are threatening New York City's affordable housing stock. The landlords who own more than 450,000 of the city's rent-stabilized apartments saw insurance expenses grow 150% from 2019 to 2025, far outpacing every other major cost, according to a new report from New York City's Furman Center. And by the way, there's closer to double 450,000 rent stabilized apartments. I'm not sure exactly what it's saying there. Maybe I just misunderstood it. And then it also goes on to say the rapid rise in insurance premiums is just one of the many pressures on housing in New York, part of a broader affordability crisis that helped Mayor Mamdani win the city's highest office earlier this month. So this is the challenge for rent control advocates, right? Which is you cap or freeze revenues, but not expenses. And then you in turn put properties into a death spiral. And we've seen that play out already in New York City. And at the current trajectory with issues like this, it's only going to get worse. All right, so that's going to take us to today's interview, and it is sponsored by Funnel, the AI and CRM software trusted by 4 of the 6 major REITs and many more leading operators like BH and Cortland. To learn how Funnel can help your property centralize operations and automate everyday tasks, visit funnelleasing.com. All right, so our guest today is actually from Funnel. And so I felt a little funny like reading this lead in from Funnel, because I want to be clear, I actually had no contractual obligation to invite him, because that's not how we roll here at the Rent Roll. But the NMHC OpTech conference was last week, and that's a big prop tech event for the industry, obviously. Plus, there's just so much buzz about AI, as I mentioned earlier. So I thought it was good timing to talk about AI and prop tech. And I thought Tyler would be a great fit for the topic, because his company is one of the leaders in this space and one of the leaders in using AI in rental housing. I've known Tyler for a number of years now, and not only is he knowledgeable in the space, but he's a good dude. He's a good guy to connect with. I always enjoy talking with him, and he's one of the handful of people, I think, in the prop tech space who you can talk to, and it's interesting. He doesn't feel like it's kind of this techno speak type stuff, because I think he understands the industry, not just the software side, but also the management and ownership side of it as well. And I think it's partly because it's in his blood. He'll tell the story, but he's a second generation multifamily guy. Now he is the CEO of Funnel. So we're going to have some fun today. Won't get too technical. We'll have some fun with it. Please welcome in Tyler Christensen. All right, welcome to the interview portion of today's podcast, and I'm honored to welcome in my friend and the CEO of Funnel, Tyler Christensen. So Tyler, thanks so much for being here.
Jay, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So first of all, I think everybody knows the name Funnel, but let's first talk about you. What's your background? How'd you get into multifamily?
Yeah, well, Jay, I'm a longtime listener to the podcast, huge fan, as is my dad. When I told him that I was going to be on here, he's very excited. And that's because I come from a real estate family. So my dad was a banker, was in commercial real estate his whole career. And then right around the time I was in college, he switched over to multifamily development, a group out of Salt Lake City called Wasatch. And so I got exposure to the multifamily world. And in college, I interned for them, looking at pieces of dirt all over Salt Lake City, going to city offices, getting zoning plats. And that was my first intro. But then also was incredibly fortunate to be in what is now called Silicon Slopes. So Utah County, Utah Valley, it's where companies like Entrada are based. Also, companies like Domo, Adobe acquired big companies there. But I was coming out of college when really that Silicon Slopes was emerging, and was very fortunate to get my first job out of college was at Property Solutions, which now is Entrada. And back then, we were still helping multifamily convert to innovative technology like websites. Right? That was the big trend.
We're dating ourselves here now. So
I know, right? I like to think of myself as a young guy, but I now have a 16-year-old daughter, and my first product I sold was websites. That is so. Yeah. But yeah, that was my background. Ultimately, spent a lot of time there. Ran the sales organization, then Entrada as they transitioned from a website and payments provider to property management software, but also did a brief stint at LRO. So you and I both, love talking about revenue management and pricing software, and then ended up over here, which we can unpack as well. But yeah, my background is I am born in multifamily and love it.
Yeah, I like that because most of us, I joke all the time. Most of us sort of stumble into multifamily by accident, multifamily or SFR. But you actually have. There's very few people who actually have it in their genes, unless there's like a hand-me-down, New York, small walk-up property or something. So that's pretty cool. You got that background. So now tell us about Funnel's origins. What's the kind of early, kind of foundational story of Funnel and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking so much. I mean, we're hopeful that a lot of your listeners have heard of Funnel. If not, we'll unpack a little bit later kind of what we do. But, on the origin side, it's a little bit like the Starbucks story, right? That a lot of folks may know Howard Schultz and you think you know Starbucks, but the background was wildly different. And the Funnel story starts in New York City as a company called Nestio. And even before that, there was a company called Urban Apartment. And the original concept for the business was Pinterest for apartment hunting in New York City. Yeah, right. If you think about what we do today, CRM for REITs, it was a long ways off, but it's an important kind of data point because the Karen Mayo, who is now at Get 100, Mike O'Toole, who is our CTO and co-founder, they had this idea of, I'm looking for multiple apartments in New York City, and all of the different ILSs, they aren't really designed for the consumer themselves. And so the kind of core function was, I find apartments and I pin them to me. And that is an important data point that'll come back up later in what we call renter centricity.
Yeah.
But so Nestio grew in New York City and ultimately kind of landed into, folks that know multifamily technology will remember this name, Vaultware. They kind of became the Vaultware of New York City. And for those who aren't familiar, taking disparate listings information from New York City owners and pushing that to the very bespoke New York listings world, which, if you're looking for an apartment in New York, you don't go to apartments.com, you go to StreetEasy, which is now owned by Zillow. And you also are going to have to work with a broker in that process. And obviously there's, that's changed a little bit over the last couple of years, but that is the one market where the brokers really still dominate the search
Still in the
process.
dark ages in New York City. Yeah.
100%. And so the reality of that business was that Karen's a phenomenal entrepreneur. Mike was a phenomenal CTO, but they were, what every entrepreneur will tell you, the first question investors ask is, what's your TAM? What's your addressable market? And what they didn't probably realize at the time when they first built it was that was not a transferable product. And so the company Nestio grew to about 30 employees, grew to about 3 million in revenue, but hit its head on a ceiling, right? Because in Tampa, Florida, where I am, in Texas, where you are, brokers are not how you find, maybe there's locators a little bit, but that's not the normal multifamily model. Myself, as I mentioned, I was running sales at Entrada at the time. And my big kind of aha was that during the Entrada Yardi lawsuit, which I was, deposed in and seeing, customers had to pick a side. They had, which platform, all-in platform. And our belief early on was there should be an agnostic renter management software tool. So fast forward from then, when I joined Nestio in 2018, we launched Funnel in 2019. The big aha that we're going to talk about from there was centralization, right? Centralization was the unlock, and Funnel, that architecture of pinning properties to the renter, became a big, important deal. But in short, Nestio is a New York City broker company. That business we've sunset. There's still a handful of customers that will send listings to brokers, but it's almost a non-existent business for us. In its place, we've built Funnel, which now serves 1.5 million apartments across the units across the country, have about 170 employees, and that's what we kind of look like today.
Yeah, and primarily a CRM tool, and now growing number of things too, right?
That's right. Yeah. So most of our clients would use Funnel as their CRM and AI product, have about 500,000 apartment units that actually do their application screening, lease signing, payments on us as well.
Wow.
Yeah. But kind of primarily known today as the CRM and AI platform for multifamily.
Yeah, so let's talk about AI a little bit. It's in the rental housing world, it seems, there's everybody's talking about AI, obviously, but there's an equal amount of excitement, but also cynicism about AI. And so I guess, first of all, is that fair? Do you agree? And then also, I guess, a related question, I kind of feel like, and tell me if you agree on this too, that we, in the multifamily industry, not you, but like more broadly, maybe abuse and overuse the word AI and kind of maybe set wrong expectations about what it is or isn't. But what do you think?
Yeah, I actually am going to take the second question first, Jake, because I think it's super relevant to the rest of our conversation.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely, the word AI is overused. I think over time, much like we don't say cloud software anymore, we just say software because all software is cloud. eventually AI is going to not be the term that dominates everything, because it is not a product, right? It is a technology like the internet, like electricity, that permeates many other products. And so then to take that back to kind of your first question of, there's both hype and cynicism right now. And I think to answer the question properly about, what is the sentiment in multifamily, especially coming off of, I was in Las Vegas this week at NMHC's OpTech with the RETC organization. And there's two different kind of spectrums or charts that I want to put together and overlap. So hopefully folks are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. And essentially, it kind of talks about when a new technology comes out, the promise of that new technology leads to a lot of hyperbole, hype, and overpromising, right? Inevitably, that leads to a disillusionment, trough of despair, it's often called, where folks are just like, this technology sucks, it's never going to be useful, I don't know why we bought it. And then you move into this slope of enlightenment where eventually, much like internet, there's something similar to a plateau where you've kind of found all the usefulness of that technology. If we think that concept, and then the other concept for those entrepreneurs or technologist enthusiasts, the concept of crossing the chasm, which really kind of buckets users of technology into different categories. And I put those two concepts together, Jay, because the reality is there are some folks who don't want to use AI and are cynics of it. And then there are others who are well through the chasm and through the hype cycle and are in the slope of enlightenment. And maybe one I would highlight, for instance, a funnel customer who this week just got named the RETC chair, Christy Simonette, CTO of Camden Property Trust. She helped funnel develop our AI product in 2020, right? Way before it was hyped and what people know about generative technology. And so we've been through multiple cycles with Camden on our AI products, first starting with chat, now and then voice. And now you get into kind of some of that slope of enlightenment where the kind of second and third opportunities are hanging. I will say though, one of the things I'd say the majority of folks have implemented AI in some form. And there was an MIT study that kind of validated this. The majority of folks in their first and early implementations of AI have not achieved the results they were hoping for. And put simply in multifamily, they haven't seen a reduction in staff. It's very rare to do that. And so I think a lot of folks are cynical. What's unique though is that they're not wanting to turn it off. And I think that those early findings, much like Camden or like Essex, some of our other partners, will transition into cost savings if, as they move into those next steps. But both, yes, hype is real. And there are a lot of folks that are a little bit frustrated right now. That was very, very clear at OpTech this week.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So let's dive into that more, but maybe to zoom out for a second, you were just at OpTech. Obviously, y'all are doing a lot. You see a lot of other groups doing a lot of things. What do you think's the current state of AI in the multifamily / rental housing world right now?
Yeah, I would say majority of communities have AI turned on. And so if you just go and pick I don't know if you do this, but every time I'm at a stoplight and I see an apartment community, I pull up an apartment website. I'm like, who manages this? What technology are they using? And it's a real thrill when it's funnel. The majority of those have some sort of AI at the front door answering the pet policy questions. One of the things that you've shared on the podcast in previous episodes is obviously we've seen a flatlining and in some places a decline in rent growth. And when you combine those two things, a lot of discretionary spend went into AI. And also on one of your recent episodes, you talked about the increase in marketing spend.
Yeah, I
think the ILSs are doing well. I'm really good friends with the Apartmentless CEO, Matthew Woods, and they're doing a great job. But I also think a lot of that spend went into AI. And unlike maybe the marketing spend where you're, what you're buying, in AI, buying chatbots, buying these nurturing tools, I think folks weren't thinking they were buying a consumer experience tool. I think they thought they were buying workforce reduction tools. And so to that sentiment question, again, nobody's turning off their AI. Yeah. But I think a lot of the hopes of, we're going to run properties without humans has not materialized. I think certainly a topic we're going to get into and one that folks hopefully know about funnel is centralization. The customers that did embrace centralization first, so again, looking at a Camden, looking at BH, you've had Joanna Zabirsky on the show, those organizations, because they've aggregated the teams that do the work, have seen actual cost savings. But if you just throw AI at an individual community with the normal 1 to 100 employee unit ratio, you're not going to see a reduction in headcount, though you won't turn it off either because it is a better consumer experience to get your questions answered at 2 a.m.
Yeah, that's such a good. Let's actually jump to that because that's a good point. I was at a event a while back where this conversation came up, which is, and this is probably a year ago now, but it was basically people saying that we're not necessarily seeing the expense reductions that maybe you'd want to see with, centralization and AI. So what impact you mentioned a better consumer experience, which I think is undeniable, but what other impact is centralization and AI having on property management staffing, on operations? And do you think we'll get to a point where it really does impact the headcounts more significantly?
We're there. I mean, there are certain organizations, and again, if you look back to even the pre-generative, and Jay, I love the recaps that you do.
Yeah.
But I don't think you were doing them when Camden started talking about this.
No.
They attributed $4 million in annualized savings to their centralization and AI efforts. And it wasn't one or the other, it was both. And let me be very specific, and they've talked about this publicly. The way that they did that, they do not have assistant community managers. Period, full stop. Essex, another funnel customer, does not have leasing offices. Both of those organizations started with centralization. And then let's just use the assistant community manager example, who does a lot of administrative tasks. When you take that and you aggregate the roles, so rather than having 200 individual ACMs, you aggregate it and say even if you started 150, right? You're not completely eliminating the role, you're bringing them into a centralized shared services role. As you begin to leverage AI, so one of the examples I'll give is our new voice AI product can handle 70% of calls without human involvement. And this is, kind of in terms of hype, I'll do my turn to do some of the hype here.
Yeah.
The metric that we measure is called a containment rate. And if I tell you, Jay, when you call an airline, hey, there's a human waiting for you, but the AI is ready to answer as well, we're measuring how often do you hit the escape button and go to the human, right? Because you could hide the human and you could say 100%, but the real test is, I know there's a human, but I'd rather talk to the AI. We're seeing 70% of our calls now. I know there's a human I could go talk to, but I would rather schedule my tour, ask about the pet policy, check on the status of my work order. 70% of consumers, because the AI has just gotten that good. When you do that again at a community level, you may or may not be able to reduce a head count. When you do that and you have 100% of your assistant community manager roles centralized, that's when the cost saving opportunities come in. So I think the disconnect of where we're not seeing the results is it's not really a chicken or the egg in terms of what needs to come first. You need to have a centralized operating model.
Yeah.
We can talk about how that looks different in the third party world if you intend for AI to actually genuinely reduce headcount. The analogy I always give to folks that don't love multifamily as well as you and I do is that multifamily still looks like old school car dealerships, right? Each individual. And so Henry Ford Brown down the road, Ford car dealership is not going to see cost savings by automating some conversations. But Rivian is, Tesla is, right? Because they've centralized that consumer brand experience. So I think there are folks that are frustrated not seeing the results, but there also are folks that will tell you, and if they've talked publicly about, they genuinely have done headcount reduction. And the one caveat I would add there's so much turnover in those roles in our industry, and mostly it's come through attrition and not backfilling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It seems like it's really elevating maybe your best people to take on a broader role, have AI take on, and centralization take on some of the administrative tasks, and really position good people to do more. But I think what we're finding too is that oftentimes you're paying those good people more as well, which is
literally. One of our newer customers shared this publicly at our conference last year. GID's the asset manager, Windsor's their property management company.
Yeah.
It is beautiful vision that they called bigger, better jobs. And what they shared this week with us was their retention rates on an employee basis have nearly doubled, right? They have gotten much better at retaining people. And the costs of those individuals, or the salaries and compensation, have grown 20 to 30%, but they're keeping those better people. So it's a win-win. Yeah, that's a huge win. And Camden shared publicly as well that their leasing agents saw their commission really take off, right?
Good.
So they had fewer sales associates, but those sales associates were making significantly more. I'm a sales guy, Jay. Like if my addressable market was Tampa, Florida to sell property management companies, I'd be frustrated, right? But if you give me a bigger pool and more sales opportunity, I'm going to lean into that. So it's definitely a retention tool for your best people.
Yeah, it's a win-win. All right. So what are the next frontiers for AI in multifamily, do you think? What's next? What's down the road?
Yeah, so there's two things that I would highlight. First is that I already talked about voice a little bit. Voice is a game changer for multifamily, for every service-oriented industry, because even in the early generative rounds, it was just so bad. And we all still see that at times. I'm flying back from Vegas this week. I had to get on a Southwest flight. I'm in my room packing up my stuff, and I zipped the bag as I was talking to the voice agent. And what was that? It stopped the voice. It couldn't understand. The background noise ruined it. the newest, greatest voice AI technology. And we partner with the chairman of OpenAI, who has a company called Sierra. It speaks 37 different languages. It can block out the background noise. And that's where you get these really high conversion ratios of it's genuinely, most people prefer it to talking to a human. So that is going to be applied to all sorts of different channels now that we're still relatively early as an industry. Let me tell you about the really exciting next thing. And it is a buzzword and it is hype. But if you follow tech like I do, all you're going to hear people talking about is agentic.
Yeah.
That's the thing that people are talking about. And what does that mean, right? Like to the Dale Christiansens of the world that are listening to this podcast, I don't know what that means. It's enabling AI and software. So old school, software, CRMs, property management software, but enabling them through a conversational layer. So a tool like Funnels chatbot to automate the work being done. And let me give you a very tangible example of what we're delivering this quarter at Funnel. On a portfolio the size of Camden's or GIDs or UDRs, call it 60,000 units. Everybody knows, I'm going to have probably about half of my leases renew, roughly half stay, right? Depending on the metro and what's going on in the market. I know how many new leases. Something that gets ignored is how many times in a 60,000 unit portfolio will a resident want to modify their lease, what we call mid-lease change, right? And it happens about 20,000 times on a 60,000 unit portfolio.
Wow.
That somebody says, hey, I got a pet, right? Or my roommate is going to transfer, or something that requires administrative work to adjust the lease status. And, now the Funnel does the online leasing for our customers. We see that. What we're enabling for our customers is a voice and chat agent that can gather the relevant information. So use the pet example. Hey, I got a Chihuahua. Is the Chihuahua allowed in our community? Yes, it is. Okay, it's, how much does it weigh? The AI is going to gather the relevant information. And historically, that'd be a human, right? In that interaction. And then instead of just stopping, that'd be one thing if it gathered information. What our customers want is they say, well, have it create the addendum, have it send the addendum, right? And then the ultimate question that our clients are debating is, should it countersign the addendum, right? But you imagine a world in which, 20,000 transactions with probably 100,000 individual pieces of communication is just fully handed over to AI. That's kind of the promise of what agentic software means. And I think what's going to happen over this next 3 to 5 years on this slope of enlightenment with AI is we're going to go workflow by workflow and identify, does a human need to be involved there? And where we end up with the better consumer experiences, you will still need humans. We strongly believe at Funnel you'll need them. But instead of doing the busy work to create the pen addendum, why not have them walk over a doggy gift basket to the unit, right? And say, hey, congrats on Fido. And that's going to be the point of differentiation is if everyone's using AI and everything goes agentic, the differentiation will still be the humans.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's been more conversation about this, and I think people, it's what it seems to be like the best case scenario is AI, centralization technology. It's taking care of a lot of back office stuff, but it's then empowering good your people to be in front of their customers, their residents, their prospects, and so that's a great example of something that a great example of that, I think.
Yeah, and we will make some missteps along the way. One of the things that we and others who were early in maintenance AI have found is that if you give consumers the ability to chat constantly with you about their outstanding maintenance work order, it's going to create more work. And so there's a lot of stuff, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, said we're in the throw it against the wall chapter. And so there's a lot of AI use cases that may not actually make the consumer experience better. But I think as we get more to, as you said, automating away the mundane tasks and elevating your best people to really differentiate the experience. And you've said it before on your podcast that it's showing up in retention rates in the REITs.
Oh, yeah.
That all of these investments in better consumer experience, better renewal technology, people are staying more. And I think that we're going to see really a acceleration of that as most folks who work in multifamily onsite would describe their job as administrative, right? Yeah. It's firefighting and it's administrative work. And very little is kind of value add customer service. And I think AI has the promise to get us closer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of that too, the better experience is when you have people who are, you're letting your best people do what they do best, which is love on residents, take care of prospects. That creates a better, stickier experiences for residents as well. So let me ask you a question. You mentioned, OpenAI earlier. This is kind of something I've always wondered is how much of the AI being developed in an industry like ours is piggybacking off a company like OpenAI, which is one name everybody knows, versus kind of, I don't know that right word for this, true, ground up, create my own AI software.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Jay, and something that I've shared before is I actually think so. I said before when I came into the industry, we were selling websites and payments. The reality. So I came into the industry in 2012. The reality is that websites and payments had been around for 10 years, right? Like PayPal was founded in 1998, and so historically, multifamily has had a very slow adoption
Yes.
cycle as an industry. One of my hot takes is that I don't think that's the case anymore. Literally, and I gave this example just a second ago. You call a Graystar community that has funnels AI on it, it's better than calling Southwest right now. I can say that definitively. And the reason for that, though, Jay, is that much of what is available to technologists today is available via APIs. And folks may not kind of understand what that means, but an API is essentially the bridge between two technology systems. 20 years ago when a new technology came out, I would have to go implement that on my servers, right? Or my like on hardware to actually get the benefits of that technology. Today, funnels engineers don't have to, code 37 different languages of AI voice technology. Through the right partnerships and the right access, you can deploy that yourself. But I will say that is going to be a very intentional decision for funnel that other organizations are going to take a different approach to. As an example, in the 2012, 2015 era, voice technology in terms of telephony, moving phones from on desk to in software was happening. A lot of the original CRMs the funnel competes with, they built their own phone systems, and as
Yeah.
the technology got better, they stayed behind because they're still negotiating deals with the telecom providers.
Yeah.
Funnel, there's a tool that listeners probably don't know, but if you're a software developer today, you would never build a phone system. You would use Twilio. We use Twilio. Your old employer uses Twilio. It just keeps you up to the latest, greatest. Same thing with payment software. You would use a tool called Stripe. So the short answer is, Jay, is I think that as an industry, it does not make sense for us to build proprietary AI tools. I think what we need to do, and actually, let me tell a fun story. So I mentioned the chairman of OpenAI runs this startup called Sierra that Funnel partners with. I was super fortunate. I got a call with him about a year ago, and he did the call because we had a similar investor. And he got on. You could tell he didn't know why he was talking to me, right? This guy in pink, and he says, "What can I do for you?" And I asked him. His name's Brett Taylor. The guy was, he created Google Maps and he created the like button. This
Oh,
guy
wow.
is like, it's like talking to the Michael Jordan, right,
Yeah.
of software. And so he's like, "What can I do for you?" And my first question to him was, the same question you asked me. Do you want to build in my vertical in the rental housing space, or do you want to partner with companies like me that are systems of record, that are CRMs, that are transaction tools? And I genuinely believe he had not thought about that question for our vertical because he sat there and processed it. And lucky for me, he said, "No, we want to partner." And so since then, we've spent the last year, because think about it, Jay, you understand, they don't want to understand the nuance of working with multifamily revenue management software, which does need to be proprietary. They don't want to work with, the nuance of the property management software systems, Blue Moon, which is our leasing system, fee transparency, which Funnel spent the last year building. There is a ton of industry specific nuance to how we communicate. But again, as I referenced, it doesn't make sense for us to build 30, 40, 50 different language AI models. And so I think to answer your question, we're all going to be gravitating more towards an API technology economy where the differentiation will be the last mile, right? It's that service of let's connect it so that a UDR, who just announced earlier this year, they're rolling out Funnel, that they don't need to go do all that work. And then we can plug it directly into kind of their multifamily systems.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. I think it's interesting because all of us kind of see those, name. It helps. It makes sense, I guess, is the best way to say it. Let me ask you another question. That something I think you've touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to get to ask it more directly, which is, I think early on when probably you got into prop tech, you're building websites, and multifamily is always historically behind on technology. It seemed to be like in the old days, it's like if you had a cool widget, a good idea, you go to OpTech and you pitch like a neat concept, you're going to get some adoption on it. And nowadays, it feels to me that there's a lot more focus on, okay, will this actually impact NOI? Does it make our business better? Does it make the customer experience better? Does it integrate with 1,000 other things I have? And so my question is, when we think about these new things happening with AI, centralization, and the people in the industry, what's the proper way to measure the value, the impact of this AI on actual performance? And can you measure it in terms of the impact on expense reduction, revenue growth, NOI?
Yeah, really, really great question. And I think that in that question, if I were to summarize kind of the three themes of OpTech, for me, one, automation, of course, which is really AI, but broadly automating away work. The second is centralization, which we've touched on a little bit. And the third would be consolidation. So to your point about a lot of widgets, a lot of startups, and to the core question of measuring that NOI, my personal opinion is that most of what we're doing in technology, and kind of like I referenced sort of the throw it against the wall era, is relatively hard to define. And at Funnel, we're experimenting with tools. So, every software developer in the world now has a AI coding assistant, right? And originally it was sold as, hey, you're not going to need engineers anymore. The reality is that has not happened. And my engineers listening, we love you. We're going to keep you forever. But it's made them more efficient. And similarly, like I mentioned, most folks have deployed an AI chatbot. Most folks have not reduced headcount, but they're not turning them off because it is a better consumer experience. I think one of the ways, Jay, that other verticals are solving this question, and my answer is I don't know exactly how it gets solved in multifamily, but is there, if you buy Salesforce, for instance, historically you've bought it by the seat or the license. How many people are buying that? And these newer technology AI tools are all moving to a usage-based model, right? That's how we pay for our Sierra usage. How many times does the AI actually handle the call? So they're incentivized and we're aligned to get it to 70, 80, 90% of the time that the AI can handle it. Multifamily has a bit of a disconnect there because we have a pricing model historically that's more based on a per unit cost, so
Right.
relative scale. I think over time, Jay, that both you will see consolidation because it's not super valuable to have a widget that does one thing. AI itself needs data and needs workflows and needs kind of full context and memory. So I think you'll see the larger PM software providers, they'll be able to quickly provide a lot of the new and Funnel as one of those large platforms. But I think we will need to move to perhaps a different measuring stick. So whether that's outcome-based pricing, as we call it. What I will say though, Jay, and you'll appreciate this because you did your budgeting session recently. We've proposed to our clients earlier this year because we acquired a tool previously called LeaseHawk. We rebranded it to Phoenix, which does things like, replaces your secret shops. And we've said, hey, would you like to pay for this on a usage-based pricing model? And you may guess, and my dad would definitely agree with this, they did not like that idea. Asset managers did not like the variability of pay for what you use. Our industry likes, predictability, likes fixed budgets.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, I think in that world, that does mean that it's going to take us a few years to really align on what's worth it, what's valuable. But by and large, again, I can't tell you a single example that comes to my head of a customer turning off AI. What is happening, though, to bring those all together is they're consolidating it. So we've always believed CRM and AI need to live together. We're seeing a lot of folks kind of turning off what I would call standalone AI.
Like the standalone widget era seems to be long gone for the most part.
Yeah, and it comes back in little peaks, right? Again, like you and I were talking before the show, Zoom was a technology in 2021 that everyone thought was going to take over the world. Fast forward 3 years, it's the worst performing technology stock because you get it from... Yeah, they trade terribly because I get it from Google. I get it from Microsoft, right? I get it from whoever my platform is. Similarly, it's a very scary place to be in multifamily if you're a point solution. But that's always been the case. You have to start there. And we started as just kind of a lead management tool. We now manage the entire front office for companies like Cortland. So it's a starting point. But yeah, startups will not survive if they do not move into being a platform.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me to that question. I mean, one thing I've always liked about UpTech is you get to see all kinds of startup ideas. I mean, prop tech is still a hot area, and UpTech has always had the what do they call it? That pitch fest where you get to hear from 5 minutes from all these different startups, in addition to hearing from established companies like Funnel. And so you kind of talked about this a little bit already with some of your comments about some of the themes, but give us, for those of you who weren't at UpTech, share some more of the kind of highlights, the buzz, the mood, what was getting people excited there. Any color you can share from the event for those of us who have some FOMO would appreciate that.
Yeah, I do think that there was a healthy dose of reality given, as you described, survive till 25 was not the right mantra. And I think most folks were a little bit pessimistic and we're definitely looking, forward to, it's not going to fix it in 26, right? It's going to get to, what was it, heaven in 27? Is that the new mantra,
Yeah,
Jay?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that did permeate, but I think it was good because that same question of, hey, how does this show up in an ROI perspective? I think that broadly, there's not a single technology tool out there that doesn't now have AI features. One thing I'll share that I'm optimistic about, there's a concept in technology development of the innovator's dilemma. Clayton Christensen, talked about that the large incumbent businesses have an incentive to protect their old business model. Think Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster could have bought Netflix in the 90s, said, no, that'll ruin our business, right? And so they didn't embrace it. If you look today, though, that's not really happening, even at the hyperscalers, right? Microsoft has an incentive to defend the old world, so does Google, but they're investing in the new world. So I do think that the generation of business leaders is embracing that. And I'd say the same in multifamily, right? Like there's probably 5 startups at Optech that, have a AI only CRM, they're pitching. But the companies like Funnel and candidly, good friends with the new CEO of RealPage, Dirk Wakeham, the president at Yardi, Akshay Rao, all of us are kind of innovating pretty quickly. And so I think there was a lot of excitement back on, hey, I'm already on a tool. And this has shown up for Funnel as well. There's a stat that we track with our investors called net revenue retention. How much do your existing customers stick with you and buy? And we had a record year this year of customers saying, hey, if you have an AI product, we would rather buy it from our existing provider because it's in the same context, right? So one of the things, for instance, that Joanna Zabriskie is really excited about, and this goes to an opportunity and what I think that multifamily operators are getting smarter about how to deploy AI. I got asked multiple times about the concept of memory, which is a pretty kind of novel concept in AI, which is, again, Jay, you may ask a pet policy question at one community, but what if you asked that same question at another BH community? And we knew that you're Jay Parsons, right? And we said, oh, are you asking about Fido, your Labradoodle? That's great. This community actually, our pet policy would adapt to him. So one of the features, like the Joanna Zabriskie make sure to remind me we need ASAP, is a customer 360 AI, right? That as soon as I jump on that page, right, and I look at, Jay, who's up for renewal, what are the 3 things I need to know about him? Rather than pages and pages and pages of history and context. And so I do think multifamily is applying proper pressure to their existing providers to say, you have a chance right now. If you can innovate and move with the pace of innovation, we're going to move with you, because it's, not worth doing an entire technology change, especially right now when rent growth is what it is.
And for those listening, Joanna, of course, the head of BH Management and past guest of the podcast. So if you're listening, Joanna, hi. Tyler, and of course, she's definitely one of the the influencers in our industry as well. Tyler, what's next for Funnel? What's the next chapter of your business look like?
Yeah, so we're really excited with our partners. Most of our customers start with Funnel using the CRM, fixing lead management. I would say there's a resurgence right now on lead management, and Jay, your data would back this up. It's just still highly competitive, right? Yeah. And so while I think as we were coming out of ZERP era, everyone was focused on protecting the backdoor. As you showed on a previous show where the marketing budgets are high, we're seeing a lot of operators, especially in the third-party business, really focused on doing the basics right. I believe one of the trends we're also seeing is that the large third-party managers, many of whom use Funnel, they're also embracing elements of centralization. And I think they're looking at their clients, the asset managers who listen to your show, and saying, hey, we can get you Camden and UDR type results if you allow us to operate more cross-functionally. So that's one big trend I don't think is going to stop, is I think that enabling the next chapter of centralization is, especially as it works within third-party management. And the analogy I always give to people is, the concept of centralization already exists in hospitality, right? Asset managers are comfortable with Marriott sharing leads. For some reason, we're not in multifamily. We say, hey, Greystar, ZRS, you can't do that. But I believe they're starting to see those back office centralization opportunities. And then with the next thing for us that we're hyper focused on, and why we've partnered with Sierra to have best in class conversational AI, is that the next era of cost savings opportunity and employee to unit ratio improvement will come from automating the agentic layer. So as I discussed earlier, starting today with mid-lease changes, we believe renewals may be another low-hanging fruit opportunity, and certainly just the onboarding experience in general. But what you need then is you need a singular system, a singular customer service experience. So about 500,000 of our 500,000 units of Funnel customers use us for application screening, lease signing, resident portal. And what that creates now is the right framework to begin automating away the work that historically has been done on site.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, certainly best of luck as you navigate the next chapter. And Tyler, thanks for being on the program. And thank you also for just, sometimes prop tech conversations can be mired in technicalities and things that go over my head. So thank you for making it easy to digest. And I'm sure that those listening would probably say the same. And thank you again for being part of the show, Tyler.
Jay, just the last story to tell you really quick.
Please, yeah.
And I used to hire new salespeople at Entrada, and I would often bring them into multifamily. And I always get the question, especially from the younger generation, hey, what's a podcast I can listen to learn about multifamily? And I had no answer. And I genuinely didn't. I mean, it's part of the reason we started our own podcast was just to unpack the history of multifamily technology. Now we point everyone to you. So it's a must follow at Funnel, all of our employees. And you do a great job. So thank you for what you do for the industry, keeping everybody up to speed and dispelling a lot of misconceptions about the industry, which is really helpful.
Oh, that's the fun part. Well, thank you, Tyler. And by the way, if you're not seeing Tyler's screen on video, he's also the host of Multifamily Unpacked, the podcast. So another good one. Well, thank you so much, Tyler.
Thank you.
And best of luck getting to 2026.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. If this episode got you thinking, here's the next step. Join us at the Forum, the best conference in multifamily, March 23rd to 26th at the JW Marriott Camelback Inn in Scottsdale. I can assure you Forum is not the average conference. It's built for multifamily executives who are rethinking how teams, technology, and operations come together to deliver standout renter and team experiences. If that sounds like you, this is where you need to be. Registration's open now at the link in the show notes. Heads up, Forum sells out every year. Don't wait. Grab your seat at the best rate today. We'll see you in Scottsdale.